friends, welcome to episode 181 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
I'm doing all right, considering we're off. Like, it threw me off that we just had, like, a casual dinner tonight, and I stare at the clock, and I'm like, oh god, I gotta get the show. Nope. It is not Wednesday. We are pre-recording this. There's no rush whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still streaming tonight because, like, I didn't want to go through the effort of, like, setting up an internal recording and then splicing in our intro and extra. I was like, no, I'm just going to put it on, and we're just going to do it like we normally do.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to listen, they can listen to us jammer on about this and do it right. I mean, it's the same way we'd normally do it, so.
Yeah, there is no live chat tonight. Well, I say tonight.
For this show.
If you're hearing this live, we're not looking at the live chat.
Yep,
if you're
we're
listening
sorry,
to this
but
recorded on Wednesday, there's also no live chat because this is pre-recorded.
Yeah, so if you're catching this on our normal stream, it's actually going to hit our website on Wednesday like it was supposed to. So if it doesn't, I'm sorry, it should have. And I will have been adjusting this. But yeah, I was heading out of town, so I was like, ooh, do I really want to try and make this work remotely? I'm like, I'm kind of doing all of the engineering at my house. Let's not do that.
yeah. And it threw me off and weird too because like we just had a show.
We did.
Then
yeah.
I had my weekend and stuff like that, and usually like we get going on the show sheet like Monday or Tuesday, and like this afternoon I was like, oh man, we have to have this done like now, like.
But honestly, I figured, and this was a really good show because it's a very conversational show. But before we get into conversational show, we kind of want to disclaim just a little bit here.
Yeah. So just a quick heads up. We're talking about Storyteller Red Flags in this show. And so there's gonna be some discussions of some crappy behavior that your storytellers may do, or you may experience out there, or you may hear stories about. There is going to be some descriptions of, or I should say, discussion of the idea, the actions of, like sexual harassment and possibly sexual assault.
Yeah, certain things that can be triggering.
Transphobia, things like that. That we're not going to get into detail of them or anything like that. We're not going to be telling stories about them necessarily.
No, not in the least.
But as always, we love that you listen to our show. But if you need to step away from this one for your own sake, by all means, take care of yourselves. We love you.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And, we understand that what we're talking about doesn't cover every situation. And we are going to be gracing some topics very lightly because we don't need to labor them more than the initial statement that we're making about them.
Agreed.
And we're also kind of trying to say this is that not all of these things that we're going to be talking about are hard stop red flags. There are many gauges of what we're talking about. Everything from like, this is cautionary. Go have a discussion. I'm sure things can be worked out. This person's probably just new at what they're doing and are not familiar with what's going on. All the way out to, you're not safe. Get out of that situation.
Yes,
like you're accepting too much just because you think it's okay.
Yes, exactly.
So we're covering all of that gambit. So yeah. I guess
we start with the definition.
Yeah, as usual. So when we talk about a red flag, what are we really saying here?
These are signs, not definite, indicators. Oh, some of them are definite indicators.
Yeah, some of them are.
Some of them are pretty definite indicators. But at very least, they are signs that you are not going to have a good time at this table.
Yeah. I mean, imagine you're, sitting in a port with your ship and you're ready to go to sea and you look at the flags that are up for that day and one of them is red. That is going to have different versions of it. One of them is going to be like, it's a little foggy. There's some rain. Be careful. Know what you're getting into, all the way to the do not unlash your boat. There's a hurricane. Mm-hmm. So we're just talking about the levels there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And some of these straight up are careless mistakes too.
Oh, definitely.
Like you were saying earlier. I mean, new storytellers, or just inexperienced storytellers. I mean, hell, even I know seasoned storytellers that do, some careless things that just were not well thought out.
Oh, completely.
They didn't understand the ramifications of what they were doing, or they didn't read the room correctly, or whatever. Like, I think that the first thing we need to say here is that don't assume malice unless proven otherwise.
Correct.
Like, if something can be, written off as a stupid human mistake of just not understanding or not having experience with or whatever, I'd say that's a lot of them.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a lot of people who go into situations, especially at conventions, where they have a mind frame from where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
I live on the West Coast. These are the normal things that I run in my games. And then I go and run a game at a convention, and everybody sitting at my table, maybe save one or two, are East Coast people who don't recognize half of the terms I'm using and may actually take offense to some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't realize they're offensive.
Mm-hmm.
That happens.
Yep.
It does. Because situationally, you're unprepared. It's a matter at that point to be able to, as a player, take a breath, a step back, and communicate clearly with that person. We've always said that. If you communicate as the first step and make that clear statement that you are unsafe or uncomfortable, or this situation doesn't necessarily feel like something you want to be involved with,
mm-hmm.
that's the first step of being a reasonable player at the table.
Exactly. Now, keeping in mind, too, that if you do feel unsafe at the table, bailing is an option.
100%. There's no obligation.
I mean, talking about your issues is going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
If you think that it can be a learning experience for people, if you do think that it is something that is just done out of, ignorance
mm-hmm.
or carelessness,
mm-hmm.
Like you said, your storyteller may not realize that they're even doing the thing, but your safety comes first, and you are also not responsible for staying in an environment that makes you uncomfortable.
Yep.
Okay? You're not... I'm going to urge communication, but please do not feel like that means you are obligated to communicate, that if someone is doing something blatantly hurtful, that you need to then take on the emotional baggage and the emotional labor of educating them on the thing and then taking responsibility for whether they do it or not.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of instances where just leave.
Mm-hmm.
Just
mm-hmm.
leave is the best option.
Yeah, and I'll say it is that if you're a queer person at a table and the storyteller starts literally talking about white ethnostate and is going to just immediately look at you and be not able to talk out of that situation or talk through it, just get up and walk.
Yeah. Gaming with a literal Nazi is not a situation which you're going to you're going to talk it out with them, and they're going to go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize
that was the situation."
Yeah.
There are situations like that. I've definitely been involved in some of those at conventions and at LARPs,
mm-hmm.
where this isn't going to be a conversation. Somebody set up this situation to be a power situation.
Yeah.
Just walk away.
You
take your ball, go home.
Yep.
There's no problem with that. We're all adults. Just walk.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's not worth it. I think there's really, I originally, when I looked at this, I was trying to figure out how to pull it all together, and my thought was kind of stereotyping the typical views of bad GMs.
Yeah,
because they do kind of fit into a number of categories.
We kind of did dueling lists on this one.
Yeah.
You had a real shotgun list, but you came up with some great stuff that I never thought about.
Well, and the thing was is that I will say this: the first thing I did was I went through my list in my head, and then I went, these are the things I can think of right off the top of my head. Sarah will think of the same things. Let me go to the trash board in r/RPG and DM Academy, and literally put in the word red flag and look at the top resident posts that queue up in that list.
Yeah.
How many times does this type of post come up? And it was fast. That list came fast.
Oh, I bet.
There's some good metrics that are out there. If some good analysts dug through red flags and looked for what they were out there, holy Lord, would we be able to create a more concise list. I think the biggest problem that I saw was the commonality. Yeah. And the frequency is definitely increased for some of these, more so than I ever imagined.
Yeah.
And I do think it's because the storytelling in tabletop has become very popular.
Yeah, well, I mean, even red flags. I mean, just discussion of this. This is nothing new. There's almost an entire genre of YouTube video channels that are dedicated to D&D horror stories. Crit Crab is probably the most well-known one.
Yeah.
But once I started watching Crit Crab, YouTube started suggesting a handful of other channels to me.
Naturally.
And so there are 3 or 4 well-known, prominent ones out there that are.
And I didn't even go digging through RPG horror stories.
Yeah.
I mean, I was part of the Discord for a short period of time because I was actually interested in some of the hard horror stories. Some of them are bad, but it worries me how bad those people are in those communities because they just don't know. We're not being taught well by our books.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're teaching us how to DM, but they're not telling us how to be good DMs and not telling us about the things that can cause problems at tables.
Well, not only that, but I think there's also and we'll talk about this one a little bit more in detail, I think, shortly in this discussion.
Oh yeah.
But I think there's also a big undercurrent of like anti-compassionate behavior.
You mean reasonable human beingness?
Yeah. Well, I guess what I mean is like anytime you like take for instance and this is a handful of years ago that like that RPG supplement for like the X card and like talking about triggers and stuff like that at your table and whatnot.
I can't think of the gentleman who wrote it, but yes.
RPG toolkit, something or another like that. But it was the supplement that kind of came out that suggests basically how to handle interpersonal interactions at your table in a safe and compassionate way. Discuss things like the X card, discuss things like your triggers and whatnot. Subjects you would have preferred to avoid, lines and veils, that sort of stuff. And like there was a lot of backlash to it.
Exceptional amount of backlash, which was really terrifying.
Of just people going like, these snowflakes. They don't, we never needed trigger warnings at our game. You talk about this stuff at a session 0, if even that, and if they can't handle it, blah blah blah, then they shouldn't be at your table. And I'm like, I agree, I shouldn't be at a table if that's your attitude,
No, I don't want to enjoy your table because I will not enjoy your table.
But I guess what I'm saying is that like. Above everything else, I think that's a pervasive attitude in the RPG gaming space.
Sadly, yeah.
Because I see like Reddit thread after Reddit thread on some of like the whole GM red flag threads that I would look into, where it's like this particular thing happened at my table. Am I the jerk here, or is my storyteller wrong? I don't know how to feel about the situation. And you've got a number of people going like, well, if they warned you about that in the session 0, then 6 months later you can't complain about it.
Well, I mean, these are the same people who are like, well, didn't you look at your contract that you signed when you got into the job?
Yeah.
You missed the loophole. That's your fault. First off, let's flat out say this. It isn't a job. You're not signing a contract. And that's the one thing we don't have in here. If your DM hands you a contract, do not sign the contract. Walk away from the game. Unless you're being paid exorbitant amounts of money and you've been doing GMing for a while and you already know the situation you're getting into and it's for artistic talent, aka critical role, walk away.
Yep.
And it's not your DM who's going to be handing you the contract. It's going to be the marketing or producer who's doing that.
But it's just the pervasive suck it up cupcake attitude that so many people have in these threads where it's like, come on, like somebody said they're uncomfortable, and if your immediate reaction is anything different than I'm sorry that I made you uncomfortable, how can I not make you uncomfortable at this point?
Yes.
How can we make this right so everybody's happy again? What are you doing?
So before we get into this, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it at the end again. Arcdoom said it simply. I think Mamato said it right, and that is Principle 0, be a respectful, compassionate human being.
Yeah.
That's it. Start there.
Yeah.
If you can't do that, don't be a DM.
Then don't play.
Don't be a DM.
Yeah.
Straight up. And if your DM is not that, don't play with them.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that.
Yep.
So that's where we're starting from.
Agreed.
But I think you did a good job in laying these out by out of game and in game. Out of story, in story.
Yeah, I think you're talking about two different experiences.
Yeah.
That kind of come together in the culmination of gaming. But some things have to do with what the environment at your table. Some things have to do with how the story is handled.
So let's start with the unwelcoming table, the out of game, if you will, a little bit, because I think the encompassment that happens there is a little easier to kind of define. It's broad. But I think it all comes back to not being welcoming. I think is the biggest part here.
Yeah,
and making I think, for something that's uncomfortable.
I think a lot of these things are probably a lot easier to ascribe to, like, your storyteller is a crappy person.
You know? Very much so.
Like a lot of the story focused stuff is just like, maybe they're inexperienced. Maybe give them an episode of our podcast and you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of the unwelcoming table stuff is not great.
Go grab one.
Well, like I said earlier, we covered this during session 0. You can't have a problem with it now.
Right.
Okay.
I see that as twofold. One, if the person is saying that either they didn't cover it in session 0 as a trigger, that's their fault. From the DM side saying, I'm putting this in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the bigger thing is that they're entering things into the game that was not part of the story.
Well, I think there's a lot of different facets to this one, honestly. All just to kind of encompass this in one sentence.
Yeah.
So first off, I don't feel like I need to disclose all of my trauma in detail to be able to participate in a role-playing game.
No, things are going to come up.
Things are going to come up. And so first off, I don't feel the need to dump all of that. But second off, everyone has things they don't know will bother them until it starts bothering them.
And sometimes they don't recognize it's bothering them. It's the, are you crying right now while you're laughing at this movie? What? I'm crying?
I'm crying? Yeah. I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I was having fun at the DM, at the D&D game, and then all of a sudden I got really sick to my stomach, and I don't know why. And then like a week later, you're like, oh, it's because he described this, and that's a trigger for me.
Or even someone who's 1 degree away from you who wasn't at the game as you're describing the game is just like, you sat through that?
Yeah.
Dude, that was your dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Exactly.
Oh, and then it hits you that like your companion pet who dies by getting ran over by a cart is literally the same thing that happened to you when you were 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And you just never dealt with that trauma.
Yeah. How are you going to expose any of that during a session 0? Like,
exactly.
Oh, by the way, when I was 4, my dog got hit by a car, so can you just not include a dog getting hit by a cart?
Yeah.
Like, that's a really oddly specific request.
Super.
And no one's ever going to think of that,
So, yeah. I think that kind of steps into the person, like I said, going away from like just doing things in game that were not described, dropping terrible events or setting up triggers and not disclosing that they're going to be doing something like that, all the way to like literally spouting like white nationalist propaganda.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny because it seems like a very oddly specific example, but you would be surprised just in looking at like some of the like r/D&D Next, r/DM Academy, Behind the Screen, r/RPG on Reddit, like the frequency with which is my storyteller a Nazi is like come up as a situation.
Yeah, every race that's not a human isn't a villain.
Yeah.
Or is questionable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is a thing.
I would even say that's more subtle.
Yeah.
But just stuff of like when they start going off on like I don't know. I don't want to get into
no, we don't need to get into the details.
But like there are direct talking points that even go away from race that are like the inadequacy of certain people and how trying to be a nice person and compassionate to other people is like wokeism. There's buzzwords that culture warriors love to use, and it flags them instantly. Yep. And you just know that you're not talking to a rational person,
or a sympathetic person. Stories are and I've always kind of addressed this is that RPG storytelling is collaborative. It is not your novelization that everyone else is writing, and therefore you're not allowed to dictate the extremeness and focusedness without everyone's consent.
Yeah,
that's it.
There was a thread I read just yesterday that was about a person who was the only queer person at the table.
Okay.
And they basically mentioned that they were slowly but surely kind of feeling a little more and more uncomfortable every game session, simply because the storyteller's story was very straight. There was no queer representation in his world whatsoever. And as the only queer person there, it makes you feel a little excluded.
Yeah.
When your world shows no examples of you.
Right.
You start to feel like maybe you're an outsider at that in that environment. And it wasn't that this person wasn't doing anything with relationships or anything like that. There was, a grieving mother that wanted her husband back because he'd been kidnapped by goblins and stuff like that. There was like a soldier that wanted to send a love letter back to his wife and stuff like that. I mean, there was some very romance heavy stuff in there, but like it was all straight stuff. So this particular player asked his storyteller, "Can you I'm feeling a little left out. Can you add just a little bit of, queer content in there? Like make one of these couples a same-sex couple or something like that, just so I feel like the world includes me.
Like that my character is not inclusive, or is not exclusive, and I'm not exclusive to the table. Yeah.
And as represented by this player, and I say that because we only have one account of this.
Right. We have no idea. Yeah.
But as represented by this person, they said that their storyteller's response was something to the effect of like, well, yeah, I'll see what I can do, but I don't want it to be shoehorned in. And if there's not really a great story reason for them to be queer, then I don't want to do it. I don't want to shove it down people's throats and stuff like that. And I'm like, that is like, there was a lot of people in that thread, myself included, who were like, that doesn't sound like he views queer people as real people.
Or that he sees them only as a stereotype.
Yeah, because and there were some people, and bless their hearts, like they wanted to see the best in the situation, and they really like genuinely not even play devil's advocate, but they just wanted to straight up play advocate. They wanted to see the best in this person and say like, well, I don't know that I would know where to start with that request.
Sure.
And there was a number of people in there who were like, what do you mean, where to start with the request? Queer people are people.
Yeah.
If you've got a wife that is distraught over her husband being captured by goblins, make a husband that is distraught over his husband being captured by goblins.
Sure.
And you've got the exact same situation.
Yep.
Like, it's literally no different.
Yeah.
And if your storyteller can't conceive of that actuality, if he can't understand that it takes literally no overhead beyond what world building and NPC writing he's already doing, then chances are this is either at very best a teachable moment, or at very worst a giant red flag that you are not at the right table.
Yeah, and I will say this: I had thought that story was a different one that I had read, which was about someone who was a queer person at a table. Or gay person at a table, who, when their storyteller, after being added to the table, took it to an extreme and basically over-sexualized them and anyone else who was like them in the story, other gay individuals.
Oh, that's the worst.
And stereotyped it. The challenge was they didn't understand that wasn't how to do it. And they weren't offended, but they were exceptionally hurt.
Yeah.
When the person was like, this is uncomfortable, you're just sexualizing this. You're not...
You said the storyteller in this case was like, oh, I just thought that's how it worked.
Correct. They were totally 100% blown to the side because they just didn't understand. They had not been part of it.
No, I mean, believe it or not, we're real people too, and we act basically just the same way that you do, only we're just attracted to a different subset of people.
Right, and it stumped them as an individual. They just had no idea.
Yeah.
And I think that's, to a degree right now, a very legitimate response.
Yeah.
From various parts of the country who have no comfort. They only have 1960s, 70 cartoons.
Yeah.
That sexualized it, or the advertising thereof of other spaces and or communication that had no connection to it. The fear side of it. So we're close, but at the same time, this is where as a player, being compassionate and saying, "Hey, I'm uncomfortable," or "This is something that I'm asking for." Well, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
Can I give you an example? And the DM being accepting.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
is being a reasonable person.
Yeah.
That comes right back to that.
But at the same time, you had even told me that the poster in this was like, look, I don't have the emotional energy to teach you. I'm sorry. I just have to walk away from your game.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That is perfectly okay.
Take care of yourself. And even if it is a quote-unquote teachable moment, and this was just an act of ignorance,
job.
You are not obligated to then teach this person how to be, compassionate. They can do some research.
Yeah.
If they're truly interested.
Exactly. That is up to them. But understand that it is there. And it does happen not necessarily out of malice.
Sure.
So,
sure.
I think this then blends back into the general disrespect of comfort, happiness, or even the wishes of players. And wishes of players in quotes.
Sure.
I will say that straight up. Because like anybody who initially dismisses concerns or requests for accommodation, I think that is there is a light level of that where
yeah.
it can feel like they're being dismissive of you when really they're just being dismissive and they don't because they're in a moment.
We have one player at our mutual tables that is gets hangry essentially, and will sometimes forget to eat.
Yeah, like the Snickers commercial.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the Snickers commercial, and there have been a couple times where it's been like, "Are you okay? I haven't eaten all day. Why have you not eaten? Okay, no,
let's just get you a snack.
Inconsequential. We're gonna get you food,
Yeah.
But like, what we're talking about is the players who would hear that and go, "You should have eaten before game anyway. Roll initiative."
Yeah,
like clearly this person is in distress. Now, regardless of whether that was carelessness or just taking, time, like their schedule did not work out in a way that they could fit a meal in before they were required to be at your game, things that, whatever. I don't care. This person is in distress. Let's handle it. We're all friends at this table, and I don't want my friend to be in distress.
You can be frustrated as a storyteller and be like, God, this is going to eat into my time and stuff. But at the same time, be a compassionate person.
I will 100% roll my eyes at that person.
100%.
But then I will get them a Snickers.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're still your friends at that table.
Exactly.
They have invested, you've invested. Let's accept that.
Exactly. Nobody's saying you can't be annoyed by it, but take care of your people. And when I say wishes of players, okay, and you want to put that in quotes, I don't think it needs to be in quotes.
Okay.
I don't think it needs to be in quotes at all.
Okay.
Because, right down to the minutia of your story, right?
Right.
Okay. If your player comes to you and says, I'm playing a combat-heavy character, I want there to be more combat in my game.
Right.
Okay. That is a wish from a player.
Mm-hmm.
Now, understanding you might need to change the flow of your story to accommodate that player.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But you still want to accommodate that player. Everybody at that table is entitled to have fun.
I agree.
And if that player is going to tell you how they want to have fun, you have a choice then.
Mm-hmm.
You can either say, okay, let me see if I can make one of my, enemy factions a little more aggressive. Maybe we do put in a couple more, combat things. Maybe we bring it up with the group.
Sure.
And see if there's a compromise we can reach if maybe the rest of the group isn't into combat one way or another,
Yeah, session to session we might swap things.
But at least what you're doing as a storyteller is you're thinking to yourself, how do I make this work?
Right.
How can I accommodate this player's wishes?
Right.
And not, sucks to be you rolled a combat character.
Yeah. Yeah. And my quotes on this is, I'm not saying give your players all of their wishes.
Sure.
Hey, I really want to have, I'm going to be a dragonborn, half fighter, half this, and I need to have a puma mount. Oh, okay? Like a puma mount. Yeah.
Didn't I tell you to stop making up animals?
Exactly. You can still say no to that, but, ask them, where are you going with this? What is it? Is it just an interest that your character needs to look like this?
Yeah.
Is it a feel? Are you power gaming? I'm okay with that.
But saying yes to everything is a different problem.
It is. We've talked about that.
And yep, we'll get there.
I think this next one is kind of encompasses all of the rest, which is straight up serial harassment.
Yeah.
And it's traditionally of female players.
This is what we call being horny on main.
Yeah. And we've seen it again and again and again. I've talked to a lot of female players who've ran into this.
Your own wife.
Yeah. I've been in games where it's occurred, especially freaking Vampire, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And I've seen it swing both ways. Again, it's traditionally pretty heavy because
I swing both ways.
Yeah, it was. You even said this. It's a men's party room.
Yeah,
that's what it is. This is the men's club.
Well, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy too. It's a boys' club. So if a girl shows up, we harass the hell out of her. And look, there's no girls in gaming, so I guess it's a boys' club.
Yeah. Or she can take it. You can take it too.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. And that it may be true that one of the girls who ends up playing at the table kind of enjoys it and is okay with it, and she can manage them just as well. The next one is not gonna handle it that way.
Yeah, and to be fair, just because someone can quote unquote take it doesn't mean it should be being done in the first place.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. You look like you could take a punch. Doesn't mean I'm gonna hit you every time I see you.
Thank you.
But
communication comes a long way with that. But the concept of them hitting on you consistently or using the game to leverage power over
Oh,
you.
that's
The
the
quid
worst.
pro quo that happens
whole,
at the
like,
table.
yeah, like you can have this magic item if we date, or like the other one we heard recently was here, I'm gonna give you this totally OP character. Can I give you a back rub?
Yeah, yeah. Or the I don't do session zeros. I do private sessions with each of my players so I can get to know their characters intimately. When do you want to do dinner?
Right. I'll wear my tuxedo.
Exactly. So yeah, that right there, which then extends into adding sexual content front and center in the story when those people are involved.
Well, there's the opposite too,
Right.
though, of like, you rejected me, so my enemies are going to target you now.
100%.
So you didn't give into my advances, so I'm taking it out on you in game.
And it's not me; it's the NPC.
Oh yeah, it's just
you
it's just-
denied the NPC.
It's just the way the story's going. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not me.
So he's upset about this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, putting that NPC, and this steps us kind of into game, and that is using them as a blockade to be an acceptable way to handle and harass players.
Yep.
So,
especially like, wanting every every sexual situation to happen to that object of your
Correct.
desires and whatnot.
Yep.
Or just gross.
You took the trait hot and sexy, so I am going to use that against you.
Oh, not even.
Yeah.
Not even. I've seen it straight up where it's like, I'm a female orc barbarian, and like, yeah, okay, so the big bad evil guy comes in and casts hold person on you. You automatically fail your save because he's the big bad evil guy. Then he pushes you up against the wall, blah blah blah.
Right.
And it goes way downhill from there.
Yep.
You know.
Totally a thing.
And then like you said, just straight up horny on main, you know? Sexual content is just a thing that happens.
But I think that brings us into where it comes into game, where it's the story focus, or lack thereof, that the DM basically puts down the line of, this is my world, and I want to play in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether they're pushing their story a specific way, and you have to follow along, and, you're in, or so much that they're actually owning the entirety of the game and control of the game, and you're just a spectator.
Yeah. I've been in those games before.
I mean, we've heard of the DMPC way too much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say, if you are a storyteller and you have a DMPC, that is dangerous. You are red flagging yourself right there.
Yeah.
I understand that you want to play, but you have a lot of characters to play with without having your own PC in the plot pile.
So many RPG horror stories, especially, like I said, if you listen to like Crit Crab on YouTube, start with like Andy introduced a DMPC, and he was this like ultra powerful captain of the guard. But he was also a 20th level wizard, and he would put us in these impossible to win fights, and then when like 3 of us were down and dead, he would come in and just mop the enemies up, and then berate us for getting in over our heads, and the whole cycle would repeat.
Yep. Yeah. No, I've definitely seen that.
There's also the person who says yes to everything, like you were talking about earlier.
Oh, the loss of control.
The loss of control. And now this is a weird one, because this sits at kind of an edge case. So I want to be careful about how we talk about this one, because a lot of this stuff can just be either A, you're a newbie, and you don't understand that these are things that you need to control.
Yeah.
You don't understand that these are things that that you can say no to. You know. That are even under your control to say no to. And also, like, there's a realm of collaborative story building where, like, not knowing your own lore before you start your game is kind of okay in a game of, like, kids on bikes.
Yeah.
Because create the lore of the town is step 1 in session 0, essentially.
Well, and that's also, if you are telling the story, even if you're doing it in D&D, having a yes and mentality about the world lore with your players early on is fine. That's fine, as long as everybody understands it's that.
So, just to be clear, we're not talking about open-ended, more sandboxy games where you're going to allow collaborative storytelling and stuff like that.
Right.
But like, not saying yes to everything and having no control of your own story extends to things like you said, allowing that OP multi-class, part rogue, part paladin, part warlock, part wizard,
Riding a puma,
riding a puma dragon,
hybrid.
just.
Because his friend wanted to play that.
Oh, yeah, I brought it from another game, and he totally legit earned this stuff in that game. Can I just bring him in? I swear he's legal.
Dude. He legit earned it in the other game. I have logs.
Oh, yeah.
That is the one that always gets me, is like, now that there's Discord, I have logs.
Okay.
I don't care.
Crap to me,
yeah. I'm sorry.
Literally doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
But, like, allowing that sort of stuff because they don't, because their friend wanted it.
Yeah.
And, like, you just can't say no to your friend when they say they want to play this character. So, yeah, sure. Bring in this thing that just breaks all of the encounter balance. The other one being their world building is a mess.
Yeah.
And I have seen this. Now, when I say your world building is a mess, I don't just mean, like, they don't know if, what the name of the next kingdom next door is.
Or even if they're, like, confused about what, like, before you get in the fight, they have, like, a white dragon or a metal dragon, like a chrome dragon, do something that a chrome dragon can't do.
Yeah, sure.
Like, whatever. That's not a big deal.
Yeah, but we're talking about, like, has no logical consistency from scene to scene.
Yeah.
We had to do this because all orcs in my world are bad. Okay, cool. Well, why did you kill those orcs over there then? Some of those orcs are good. Well, you said all orcs were bad. Well, right, but these ones are good, and you're bad people, and the guards are arresting you now.
Yeah.
Okay, like, how am I supposed to act in that? Yeah. I liken this to, like, trying to drive with the fog on, through heavy fog. It's like, it's not in itself dangerous. The fog is not dangerous.
Right.
In a way that it is going to physically harm you by interacting with it. However, not being able to know what the heck is going on from moment to moment is what's going to cause the disaster.
Yeah, it is the inability for your players to see the verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude.
I was getting close.
Yes. You got it.
I got it.
You're doing amazing, sweetie.
But if your players can't see that, if it's not a reference point for them, it is very hard for the theater of the mind's eye, to be able to wrap around how to be someone else in a world that they can't see and interact with. And to see and interact with it, they have to find that point, that reference point. Whether it's cartoony, whether it's whatever, it doesn't matter. It still has to have some sense of reality in a dream state to them. So, kind of swinging from that is the opposite, where they're in control of their world to an extreme.
Oh, yeah.
They have everything locked down. They say no to everything. Oftentimes, like, they're not just picking, like, and again, we're not framing this to, they're like setting a scope or a scale of, like, hey, we're going to use the main player's handbook, we're going to use the DM's guide, and we're going to use Xanthar's book. Mm-hmm. And that's it. I just want those. I don't want to
use the thing from Tasha's.
No, we're not accepting Tasha's stuff. I don't have time, and I don't have the book.
Exactly.
So.
And
that's okay.
Saying no in that situation is perfectly acceptable.
But being like, we're going to be doing it with this. These are the specific races and specific classes that you have to play. Each of you must do it this way. No, you can't pick that subclass or any of these extra things. We are going to be, it's D6, drop 1, and the stats come in the order. Well, that's not even like a base D&D. Well, that's how I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. Superior control of the game. Super control freak.
Yep. Now I would say these are probably the storytellers most voted most likely to railroad. Mm-hmm. Because they're the ones who are going to have a real big stranglehold on how they want their story to go.
Where they want to get to a scene.
Exactly, and that includes their story beats. Mm-hmm. And so if you guys try to do something innovative or creative, or go off the path in any certain way, or pull on a thread that they did not intend for you to pull on, these are usually your people who are going to try to force you back into the other thing.
Go everything from as light as slapping your hand when you start looking at a B plot that they may or may not have given you, and then laugh when you do grab a red herring that's clearly a red herring.
Yeah.
Yeah. And or they start off the story with, this novel I've been writing. Mm-hmm. This is the world I'm doing it in. Now, I'm going to take a step back and say that I know a few novelists who do storytelling as a way to help them understand communication, natural communication between people, because situations present themselves very differently. In your mind, this is how the scene is going to go, but throwing another human in there to do the other side of a conversation and you give them a general frame of reference makes for a very different feel and can give you a totally different story to write, which feels way more natural. And I am 100% accepting of that. That is not what I'm talking about here in the least.
Sure. No, exactly.
That is the opposite. That's giving your players 100% control of your world so that you can listen and become a better writer from that.
And hear how they explore your world, hear how they what things they find interesting and engaging.
Or odd.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, why does this doesn't make any sense? Okay, let's explore why that doesn't make sense.
Sure. Okay, let's try to make it make sense.
Yeah. And that right there is I think the gravest difference within that control freak edge is that you have these opportunities to create some beautiful stories from something that's in your mind. Let that expand. It's everyone doesn't have to. We're going to play in the Marvel universe, and one of you has to be Thor. You have to be one of the Marvel characters, and you have to play them like the canon from the movies. Everything in the movies is canon. That is how it has to be done.
I would say they probably don't even explain that.
Right, it's assumed.
You're Thor, and then the moment you do something, it's like, no, that's not what Thor would do.
Yeah. And changes
Are you playing
your
my
actions.
character? Or am I? Yeah.
I mean, so much so they may fail something for that you have passed. Like you make a roll and it succeeds, and they're like, "No, you drop your hammer." What? Why? Like, it happens. It's a hard move.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, like this was my action, and you just took it away from me. Why did you do that?
Yeah.
Like those types of things definitely fit within the control freak because again, they're trying to get to a scene in their mind.
One of the storytellers you had in the past, you said was a big one of these control freak, but about the lore.
Oh my god,
of the game,
so much. So there was a couple lore masters, and I'm gonna actually point out one that I was told about, where he went into such detail about his cities that in talking to one of the merchants, he got into a discussion about cigars. And the qualities and where the tobacco comes from and how it gets to those cities and all of this other high detail that had nothing to do with the story in any way. So that when they came across one of the cigars, the players should have looked at it and done research, and then they would have known that this came from this far-off place because the lore dump that he did for 2.5 hours about cigars.
Well, I only heard the first 15 minutes of it because I was asleep.
Correct. The lecture I was not interested in. This TED Talk sucked.
That is a storyteller right there who has done a lot of world building and is so proud of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they are just strutting around and preening in front of everybody is what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's... I think the lore mongers, the ones who are literally trying to show off the world that they built in lieu of the game.
Yep. We did a past episode on how to lore dump without sounding like you're lore dumping.
Yeah.
A lot of show don't tell and stuff like that. So if you're worried you're one of these, we have a past episode on that one. So
Yep.
Honestly, I'll be dead honest. If you were any of these, I can tell you.
I flat out say I was a few of these at one time in my life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've done DMPCs, but it's been a long time since I have. But I don't think my DMPCs were never like the OP. I'm gonna rush in and save everybody because I need to be the hero sort. It was mostly just because I wanted to be in the game also.
I want to say all of my DMPCs that I had, which I did not have many, were always a fill-in character.
Yes.
To be a guide or support.
Yes, that's typically my DMPC.
And it wasn't ever part of the mechanics. It was literally something for quality of life.
Yeah.
That was what they were there for. They were literally quality of life PCs.
I can tell you right now that I may even still be the says no to everything control freak storyteller.
Okay.
I know I have these tendencies at least.
Mm-hmm.
I have knee-jerk reactions, and I've talked about this on the show before, where one of my players was like, we're gonna sleep at a different inn. We're gonna find the crappiest inn in the town, and we're gonna stay there. And I'm like, okay, it's called the Surly Girl Scout. And there's a part of me that's going, I hate it. It doesn't happen. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And everybody at the table's laughing.
Everybody at the table's laughing, and there's that little angel on my shoulder going, say yes and. Just say yes and, Sarah. It's that easy.
Yeah.
Everybody's enjoying this.
Yeah.
Unclench your butthole and say yes and.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I did, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
We all had a lot of fun, but I am... The devil on my shoulder is the says no to everything.
Yeah. I will say my hardest thing that I have, and I'll flat... I won't say it's my hardest thing, but it's definitely something that I've recognized, and I've tried to make adjustments, and it's hard because I haven't had a lot of stories since we started this. I've literally still been running pretty much the same story since we started doing this podcast. Is I have a hard time shifting and adjusting inclusivity. I'm bad about it because I don't think about it.
Yeah,
because it's not super into my story,
mm-hmm.
and I don't know if it fits with my players until someone says something.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't get there.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I don't put weight on race or class or pronouns in my story nearly at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. First off, I think I'm the. Well, no, because there's one other queer player at your table at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say either of us are like really like
it's not a thought that we have
for representation necessarily, and it's not like your NPCs in your story are vibrant enough that they stand on their own merits. That it's not something I think either of us feel the need to. And to be fair, when I have come to you with queer themes, you've rolled right with them.
It's never
my 7C character was bisexual.
Yep. And you asked for something, and I did.
And when I said, okay, cool, we had a little weird romance rivalry, lovers to haters to lovers to haters plot with a member of the opposite gender. I'm going to take star-crossed lovers this second time in the second part of your campaign, and I would like it to be a woman that I'm interested in. And you went, okay.
Yeah.
And there was never a question. It played wonderfully. Your representation of a woman-woman relationship was perfect.
Strong individual. That's all I thought of. And changed the pronoun.
And it is that easy.
And that was the thing, was for me, it wasn't like I just had an NPC who I knew was going to be the strong guard, and I just replaced the person from male to female.
Yeah.
Not a big deal.
And it is that easy.
Yep. But I would say for me, it is not something that normally sits in my mind because, again, my mind frame is a straight mind frame.
Sure.
I'm going to think of my stories in a straight mind frame. It is just being able to accept when those things come through that makes it reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would say that's the thing. Yeah. I mean, and just again, being a young GM early on and making young GM mistakes, overreaching, accepting too much, being ill prepared and or over prepared, or wanting to get to a scene was always a thing.
Yep.
It happens. We all do it. So don't feel bad if these are some of your flags. Just be better.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, half of this is about recognizing them and just doing better. Yeah.
Yep. Everyone can get better. So we do have some questions.
Yeah, let's some questions.
I'm happy that these came in. Thank you, Nevim and the Mad Elf. We really appreciate them.
All right. So Nevim would like to ask, what are the most common red flags you've encountered, and how do you deal with them? I would say common ones that I've encountered. God, I'm trying to think of it.
The most common one that I've encountered are DMs that just straight up ignore what you're doing. Like, they're in the story so deep that they don't recognize your value in the story.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Or don't recognize your value, but they recognize another player's value because that's the player they're focused on.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Your voice isn't loud enough, if you will.
Yeah, in fact, I'm guilty of that.
At times,
I'm guilty
but
of that
not
at
really.
times, yeah.
I would say not really. From a player's perspective, I'm going to say not really.
Even just last game, you had to remind me that you did something very significant, and I was like, oh, crap.
But there's a lot that you're covering, and I did, and you adjusted.
Yes.
That was it. That's the beauty.
Sean and I bailed on a game a handful of years ago because the advancement was just super slow.
Wasn't even like milestone, or
It wasn't. It was like,
or the milestones were so far apart that
it was the milestones were, well, not even, it wasn't milestone. It was actual, honest to goodness, hard XP.
oh, okay.
But it was like,
Trickled.
you earn 5 XP for that. And we're like, hold on, let me do the math. How much XP did you earn tonight? He's like, I earned 100 XP tonight. How much do you need for your next level? 16,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to take us 4 years to hit the next level.
At this rate.
At this rate. Are you having fun with that? No. Are you enjoying the story?
Right.
No.
Right. And as a storyteller, are you doing that because you're trying to keep advancement low? Then communicate that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it.
But I mean, there was also some like interpersonal problems at the table too that I think were going on and stuff like that. I think those are probably just the most common ones that are just like, sometimes you just get into a group, and I don't think it's like any, like, you point to a single red flag and go like, holy crap, I've got to get out of here. But I think you and I have both sat at tables where we're just like, yeah, something about the flavor of this game is not hitting me right, and I'm just not having fun. You know?
I've definitely hit those.
It's that like weird vibe one, just the vibes at the table.
Which I think the next question kind of sits into, which is, I've faced a red flag situation, what should I do? I think at the lowest level, if it's a soft flag, talk, communicate, especially directly with the DM in a comfortable way that you're, text them, DM them, whatever it is. If you're at the game and there are other people sitting around and you feel comfortable being able to bring it up. Obviously, if you can, don't break the flow of the game unless it's something that's breaking the flow of the game, because that's going to set someone up to be defensive regardless of how it's going. A DM who's actively in a game that you're then going to question is going to come to it with a defensive state, because their mind is not about stopping the flow.
Agreed. And I would say outright it's rude to break the flow at that point.
Right. Take a pause. Unless it reaches a level at which it is a frustration.
Sure.
Where it's uncomfortable and you can throw the X card and be like, I'm uncomfortable. I've done it.
Yeah.
I've thrown an X card at a game. I know that's a very uncomfortable point to do it, but you have to be uncomfortable, but know that there is a comfort point at the table to be able to do that.
Sure.
I think beyond that, you have full rights to walk. You have no obligations.
Yeah.
You can walk away from a table. Walking away from a table should never destroy a friendship. It is a table. It's a discussion, definitely later, if you want to keep that friendship going. And things that happen at a DM table can be discussed later.
Yeah.
Outside of it. Like, you hurt my feelings. That's when you can be reasonable and let the person have time to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I almost don't want to answer the question, what should I do? Because, at least for me, it's so dependent on what the red flag is.
And the situation.
There are, hey, can I talk to you about the direction your story's going? It's making me a little uncomfortable. And there is, run. In fact, call the police.
Yeah.
Red flags. Like,
I have read red flags several times on r/RPG and DM Academy that literally make my skin crawl. Like, you're in a terrible situation with all of those people. They are not your friends. Get out now.
Yeah. And in fact, call the police.
Yeah, bad things have happened.
Yeah, so red flag situation, unfortunately, is too broad of a question. What should you do? Whatever you feel is right for your safety and sanity.
Yeah, be a reasonable individual about it and be compassionate. But if that involves you just simply quietly walking away, walk away.
How did the phrase go? Do no harm, but take no shit.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. You don't have to you don't have to be aggressive. You don't even you can be as defensive as you need to be, but just get out of the situation.
Yep.
You can always look at it later. It's just a freaking game. It's just a game.
Yep.
I'm the source of a red flag. What should I do?
Stop.
Yeah.
Stop being the red flag.
Yeah. Pause. Whatever you're doing, if you think for a second that you're the red flag, pause.
Yep.
Make some notes. Reflect on what you're doing. Communicate openly.
Congratulations, you have achieved step 1, which is awareness that you are the problem in the situation. This is good news.
Yeah.
This is good news, I assure you, because step 2 begins with you seizing the control you now have over that situation and changing it for the better.
And the best thing you can do is start with yourself.
Yes.
Are you being reasonable? Are you being compassionate? Are you being honest?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Start with yourself on those 3 things.
Yep.
Then stretch that to the individual who's affected or the group that's affected.
Have I harmed anybody with this behavior?
Yep.
Bring it up at the table. Swallow your pride. Say, guys, I realize I've been doing this. I am sorry.
Yep.
If this has hurt anybody, I'm going to discontinue doing this, and I welcome feedback about it.
Yeah. Things change. I will change them now.
Yes.
I have that control.
Exactly. So I assure you, if you don't have an ego about it, recognizing you are a red flag situation and you are hurting others around you is a good thing because you can change it.
Yeah. If you are not a GM narcissist or
Yep.
psychopath, one of those 2, or sociopath, you're fine. You can work through this.
I figure there's 2 ways it goes. You're either a narcissist who says, no, it's not me, it's the children who are wrong.
Right.
Or you are a sociopath who says, I know I'm hurting these people, and I don't care.
Yep. Now, if you're either of those, you shouldn't be listening to this anyways. This is just going to give you help on how to do both of those better. So, yeah.
All right. The Mad Elf asks, how would you suggest opening the door to allow your players to feel comfortable pointing out that they're seeing red flags with you or other players?
I think going back to the DM toolkit,
Mm-hmm.
the same thing we talked about during Arc Doom, that simple list and being comfortable with your players being able to drop an X card to talk about lines and veils, like setting that. Even if you haven't established triggers or anything like that, just making sure that you've laid the groundwork for them to be able to step forward and say, I am uncomfortable. And this is the process by which I can say I'm uncomfortable in a clean way.
Now, you had a situation where you threw the X card. You're the only person to ever X card in my game.
Mm-hmm. Because I felt comfortable doing it.
So just describe that to me from your end. What because I only vaguely remember how I reacted to it.
You reacted exceptionally well. And we had lightly discussed it with the group. We did not set up lines and veils. You set them up in session as you believe triggers might come up, or talk with players as they come.
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, I did actually have like a formal ask about it. But
Right.
everybody was very like, whatever.
We trust you. Is what came out of it.
Yeah, we trust you. And one player was like, no drowning, and I was like, cool.
Yeah,
and that was it.
You will never reach a situation where you're going to be in water and drowning.
Right.
Great. That's all I wanted.
Water may be present. Water will never be a hazard.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's those kind of situations that set things up, but it also creates a side situation that things can come up.
Sure.
And in this particular instance, it was my discomfort with the story with another player who, as I saw it at the time, was not being a co-story creator.
Yeah.
They were keeping a story private.
Yes.
And it was somehow private between you and them in my frame. And I was like, I need to X-card this. I am literally hitting a frustration point, and I need to stop gameplay.
Yeah.
Like, I am not comfortable with the way this is ending. I had a vision of, from a character's perspective, how this B-plot was going to end. This is shit.
Yeah.
And I felt comfortable because everyone at the table I knew. Everyone at the table I understood would feel that frustration and be able to help me get through it. And I trusted you to be able to go, whoa, okay. This isn't a bad part of my story. There's something that's happening here. And that's what you did, was you timed everything out. And you're like, okay, explain. Like, what's going on here?
Sure.
Give me pure emotional dump. I don't care. Let's do this. Unless you want to sidestep, but we're taking a pause regardless.
Yep.
And we rolled through it. And it was... And I don't need to belabor the situation. We've talked about it multiple times. Feel free. It's in a lot of the episodes. But the whole point of it is the way that you did it was you listened, you reiterated, you opened the door with the other player to say, okay, I know some of the things because we've talked through it. I do feel what he was saying was valid. Let's open the door a little bit here and talk about this if you're comfortable with it.
Sure.
And they did. And they were able to communicate, like, what's going on with that. And it made sense. Like, at that point, I became comfortable. Like, okay, I understand what's going on. I just need more of that. Like, as the player. Not necessarily even as my character. But I think it's important to the story that comes through more. Because we're way into this.
Agreed.
And none of this has come out. I know what this person wants. I know what this person wants. I know what... I know around the table pretty much where everybody is going, at least on the surface.
Yeah.
And this is still a freaking mystery.
Yes.
On why these things are happening. I mean, it's cool and it makes for some funny situations at times, but this is now awkward from a player's perspective. And at the end, I was okay with it. And you verified that. You were like, are you okay with this situation progressing? And I'm like, yes. It's not what I wanted, but I'm okay with this situation progressing because I understand where this is going with the story.
Yep.
And it felt like there was a reoccurring theme, which is where my frustration came from, of like, why is this happening every time?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this the epilogue of every one of our stories?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm uncomfortable with this. It feels like this is way uncomfortable. And in the end, I was comfortable with it because we opened things up.
Sure. Okay.
So I think that was the difference there.
You want your storyteller to acknowledge
100%.
first your concerns at the table.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to basically those concerns to take precedence. We're going to take a timeout. We're all going to take a breather.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted space to air your concerns and to know that those concerns were being heard.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted the discussion to be opened to the rest of the table.
Yep.
So that everybody else could air their own concerns regarding this topic, and then come to a consensus about it.
Yep.
And then, of course, that storyteller then has to be willing to accept that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So as a storyteller, you do need to be able to swallow your pride and be like, okay, 4 of my players just said I'm the asshole.
Yeah.
Maybe I am, and maybe I need to stop doing that. You know?
Right.
And it can be that simple.
Mm-hmm.
It can be that simple if you don't let your ego get in the way of just being like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was the jerk. I will stop being the jerk.
Yeah. And I will say, to answer Mad Elf directly, is the best way you can make your players feel comfortable with pointing out red flags or addressing red flags is setting that groundwork early and making it often, so that as those things are, like, you reiterate usually at the beginning of the game if there's going to be something uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You make sure that that's known, that there might, like, you'll give a mild trigger warning, no different than any TV show would do.
Sure.
And we're usually okay with it. It's not necessary, but at the same time, it's nice because on any given, Saturday, you don't know how someone's feeling.
No, absolutely.
The vibe check is there, but it doesn't get into details.
Absolutely.
And you need to have that framework.
And, like, I know some people worry about spoilers. Like, oh, how do I give trigger warnings without giving spoilers? Like, I assure you, the impact of the scene unfolding in a dramatic sense is going to be so much more important than, hey, is everybody okay if there are kids involved in the combat? Just from the standpoint of the bandits have been getting low on people and have been recruiting younger and younger. And this is done for dramatic effect. This is not done just because I'm trying to kill kids. Like, you know, and everybody was kind of like, oh, that's spoopy, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And
then in scene...
in scene, it has so much more dramatic impact because it's done in situ.
And we're prepared for it. It's not like we pull off the masks, we pull off these beards and the dwarves and they're kids.
Yeah.
Like, that's not important. That's not the way the scene was meant to be dropped. That's not how it's presented.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that once you set those expectations, you're making comfort for your players so that as you maybe are missing the read on the table, they're comfortable with pointing it back out and you going, oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I would definitely say as you get more seasoned as a GM, you may actually miss triggers and you have to ask more because you're comfortable with your players to a point where you feel you're okay with doing things.
Sure.
I think that's happened to me more than enough times.
Sure, and like I said, too, like, situations change and not everyone is aware of their own trauma.
No, definitely not.
You literally will have situations where you're like, why am I crying right now? I cannot think of a logical reason why I'm crying right now. And then a week later, you'll be like, oh, that's why. Yeah. I remember.
And, yeah. Again, always remember, as a storyteller, you are not a therapist for your friends to put them through trauma to help them through a situation.
Yep.
And I don't care how much they annoyed you last Thursday with doing something annoying. Do not teach them a lesson.
Leveraging their trauma against them. Oh, my God.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. That's definitely red flaggy. That is definitely red flaggy. And if you catch another player doing that to another player, take them to the side.
Yep.
That is not allowed. That is not allowed. So
yeah, opening the door to allow your players to feel comfortable pointing out they're seeing red flags in you is essentially just earning their trust by doing it well with grace and aplomb.
Now, I had liked stacking these stories because we have a topic next week that is a revisit. It's kind of a retrospect. We're going back and looking at the Matt Mercer effect, but kind of from a different angle, I would say. A new lens because it's been a few years.
I mean, look, let's both be real. This is episode 181 now.
Yeah, we'll be going into 182.
181. So this is going to be episode 182. Yeah, guys, we're going to revisit a few topics.
Yeah.
We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years now, so yeah, we're going to revisit some.
I had seen a discussion where someone was talking about how live play and Critical Role, these produced shows, has changed how we play games for both the positive and the negative.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it really has had an amazing impact, not only for the positive on just the, what's things shown off, but also on the negative of what it's brought people into, how much this has become popular. And I think it's good to come back to that. And it really points out where some of these red flags for storytellers come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of ripple effects from it. We're in a much different era. It's been almost like a renaissance. It's really changed the entire landscape of our tabletop RPGs altogether. So for, like you said, better or worse. Anyways, you'll hear all that next week from us. In the meantime, you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave, and join us on our Discord. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us some questions. Join the discussion with the other great storytellers that are on there. You can find that link on our Twitter, as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
Yeah, as I said, the show on the 19th is releasing pre-recorded, but we will be back live again on the 26th after I get back in town. So you'll be able to hear us that night at 7 p.m. Eastern. We'd like to thank our Patreon members, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Sam, Subjet, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion Veteran, Hulavu, and Sean. We really appreciate everything you do and how you help us. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can get that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can get that at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on YouTube Music. And our outro music, which is Only Our Footprints in the Sand, which you're hearing right now, by Midair Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
Big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our friends who sat outside our tables, give us these great stories to share with you over the years, and you, every single one of our listeners. We love you guys so much.
Love you guys. Good night.